So let's talk tune for a minute. I just kind of want to go over where I'm at with the 2300 tune. Um, One of my biggest gripes that I've had with this conversion is the idle quality, which, if you talk to anybody, and I've talked to many people that know these motors, they'll tell you you can't get them to idle very well. But I expected with EFI that it would idle better. The thing that I've found really interesting, two things. It likes to be very rich at idle. Part of that is because of how much overlap this cam has. It's pretty tight lobe centers for this motor. It's on 110 degree lobe centers, so you got a lot of overlap, and overlap kind of fools it into thinking that it's richer than it is. So it's not really running as rich as I have it set, but you have to set it. You have to set the AFR that low with the EFI. So I'm running about 13.2. If we look at the target air fuel ratio, you'll see I'm about 13.2 in this area right here, which is anywhere from, and I could probably change this now because I've changed some other things with the timing, but anywhere from 80 kPa down to 43 kPa, between 5 and 900 RPM. I've got it set pretty rich. It just, you bring that up to 14, 13.8, 13.6, it starts missing pretty bad. It just likes to be rich. I'm about 12.5, wide open, 12.6. And our cruise, of course, feathers out to the 14.3 area for E10 gas. This is a good number. So, yeah, I may lean that out even more, but, Stoke of E10 is, 1401, I think, or 14.1. So anyways, that's the target air fuel ratio. But let's go back to the timing table. One of the things, the second thing, the first thing is running at rich at idle. The second thing is, there's going to be a lot of people probably say a lot about this, but it works. I'm running the idle timing, almost 30 degrees of idle timing. Now, you get a lot of people say, well, hold on a minute. That's supposed to be 14, 12. Well, normally you have a vacuum advance. If it's hooked to manifold vacuum, you'll actually add another 14 to that. So you'd actually be at 28. So I'm not that far off. And with this cam, you're going to run a little bit more timing with a cam with more overlap anyways. This is where I peaked vacuum at. I was right around 72, 70 kPa. That's about 11 inches of vacuum. By running the timing up to almost 30 degrees, out of gear, I'm in the 54 to 50 range. So I've picked up a bunch of vacuum. It's not pinging. I don't have any detonation. There's no signs of that. The plugs don't have any aluminum on them. So really, it's almost like it's locked out. I'm at 29.5. That's just how the numbers worked out when I did all the offsets. I don't want to run quite 35 degrees at cruise yet. I'm probably going to boost this number up a little bit now since I drove it. It's pretty much almost like a locked out timing, though. It doesn't ever go lower than 29.5 unless, you have real low manifold vacuum, so high load, and you're in the 1,000 to 1,200, 1,1400 RPM range. It will back that timing off. So as soon as you tip in, what you would call tip in, it's going to drop the timing slightly, but it's pretty rapidly going to come back up. This thing is very frequently in the 30 range. Wide open throttle, we're at about 33. And then, of course, cruise, as the vacuum drops and we're up in our cruise 2,500 and on, we're at 34.5. Getting pretty decent mileage with it like that. It really ran fantastic today, but the idle quality, it returns to idle much better with a lot more timing. It doesn't, it's more smooth, I guess I should say. It's more smooth at idle here. It just sounds better. The exhaust is far quieter, which means that we were burning a lot of fuel outside of the cylinders, which is not good. So our exhaust gas temperatures would have been higher. But I thought this was really interesting. I'm like, that's an awful lot of timing, especially, you should be able to run it at 14, 15 degrees, no problem, 18 degrees maybe. So I was telling Jeff Jones about it, and Jeff said, geez, that's a lot of timing. And so anyways, he texted me a little bit ago and he said, hey, I got to thinking about what you're saying. You might be onto something there. He said, I just bumped my timing up, and he's running a 274. So his cam duration is 274. So that's like 228, 230, advertised, or excuse me, at 50. Sizable difference. He's running a much larger cam. And he said he increased his vacuum quite a bit. He said it started to ping a little bit. He's not running EFI on it right now, so he doesn't have the ability to map this out the way that I did. He's kind of stuck with adjusting the distributor. That really limits how you can do this. He said, but he bumped it up, I think he said, to 27 degrees, I want to say, and he said it's never idled better. These engines seem to like a lot of timing at idle. So, that's something you can look at, especially if you're running EFI on these things. It's very easy to map it out that way. When you're stuck with strictly a centrifugal advance and your vacuum advance is, unless you hook it to manifold vacuum, you really can't do it this way. But, this thing, I can really map it out how I wanted it. There's a good video on Holley's website on how to map this, by the way. And I must have built 20 maps before I got this to where I wanted it. But it seems to be really happy with a bunch of timing at idle. So if you got a Ford 200, that might be a good place to go. The VE table's looking good. Now that I changed the timing, it's adding a bunch of fuel to the VE table. I suspect that's because the engine's becoming more efficient as I increase the timing. So I expect it to do that. It was adding 10, 11% in some of the cruise areas, which is totally fine. Let's take a look at that. I don't smooth, although I may do some manual movement over here. There's, this is what happens is there's an area here where it learned, and it didn't learn over here. It's just because it was probably not in closed loop or something like that. But this is looking okay. It's not as smooth as it should be, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be smooth because you're not in these areas. It's probably never going to be over here. You're only going to be in the 4,000 to 5,000 RPM range probably when you're wide open throttle. You'd be doing 100 miles an hour if you were down here. So it mainly, this engine's going to operate in this general area right here. So this is acceleration and cruising around town. This is cruising in the highway, down the highway over in this area. This is wide open throttle up here. So, you're not going to get anything down here. You're not going to get anything up here. You're not going to get anything up here. And you're going to get very little over here, if anything at all. You're going to get this. This is decel down here. When your map is very low, so high vacuum, high decel. That's what this area is down in this range. So, don't worry too much about what this is, but, this is this VE table or volumetric efficiency table. And engines have different efficiency depending on what RPM and vacuum they're at. So that's why these numbers change, So it becomes more efficient, when it's running wide open up here. Some of these numbers are very close to 100%. So that's it. I just want to cover that real quick. This is, just a quick one on, where I'm at with this build on the 200. None of this will be usable when I do port injection. But we'll do it all over again. It works the same way. It'll still self-tune. But I think if you're running EFI, or even if you're not, I would say today, with the things that we know today, peak out your vacuum with your timing here. That's really the best way to get it to idle well. These 6s are never going to idle great. They just don't. But anyways, I just wanted to talk about that real quick. They seem to like a lot of timing, and Jeff is seeing the same thing. So that's just a quick update. I just want to show this real quick. I did play around with the tune again this morning a little bit. I added a little bit more timing to it. It didn't like it. It wasn't pinging, but it wasn't, the power was starting to fall off. So I think the curve that I've got in it right now is good. I might add a little bit of timing up top, because right now this thing tops out at like 34.5, and it really should be around 36 at cruise maybe. But you know, it ran so well yesterday that I don't think I want to screw with it. I may just leave it alone, but it's pretty good. But you can see, you know, the map is down in the mid 50s. That's, you know, and it's an inline six, right? So it's not idling so stable with a cam in it. But you know, you can see where my ignition timing is now. EFI, it varies the timing to stabilize the idle speed. That's what it's doing right now. That's why it's jumping all over. But it's set at 29.5. The half degrees don't really matter. That's not really important. It's just the way that the math worked out when I did the offsets. But you know, this seems to be much happier here. You know, it was like 70, 75 kPa at 20 degrees at idle. So it likes a lot of timing. Jeff's seeing the same thing, so you know, I'm going to start running it like this. I drove it all day yesterday, did a nice long trip with it, and it was happy. So anyways, I just wanted to show that real quick.